I started to care deeply about the social and environmental injustices of the world when I was in my early 20s. As a passionate yet pessimistic college student, I remember sitting at the kitchen table telling my father I wasn't planning on having kids. And it also wasn't responsible for anybody in my generation to even think about repopulating a dying planet. And my father, who is the blue jeans flannel wearing type hippie, said, "Right, Em. We've all been there. I said that in the 70s as well, and here you are. The future isn't always as dark as you think it is." My mother is a music teacher and the embodiment of a lifelong learner. After actively resisting learning music from her and evolving into a righteous member of the all-predictable youth who insist that they'll never follow in their parents' footsteps. It was around that same time I found myself similarly becoming attracted to the field of education. Cultural theorist Bell Hooks states, "The classroom, with all its limitations, remains a location of possibility. To educate, to learn, inherently are acts of hope. Learning imagines a future of possibilities. Transformative education goes one step further to reimagine a better future and to actively work for change." And this is how I began my career as an educator. Teaching high school students life skills English in Toronto became an opportunity to write letters to big corporations like Nike and Adidas, expressing our concern over their exploitation of workers overseas. I think we're still waiting on those responses. Education, to me, equates to hope. And then came Green School. One of our well-quoted phrases here at Green School states that families come for the beautiful buildings, but they stay for the teachers, for the learning program. And this has been true for me as well. Collaborating with colleagues and students at Green School has been one of my greatest honors of my career and life thus far. I became enthralled with the creative opportunities to implement transformative education practices. Some of the most exciting and challenging programs I have developed here include programs such as our annual V-Day project, which positions issues of gender justice at the forefront, integrating disciplines such as art, service, enterprise, social studies, and literacy along the way, empowering students and community members to use their voices to affect positive change in our local communities. Or our Green Generation climate action projects, integrating science, arts, activism, media, political economy, language studies, and applying them locally to investigate impacts of coal-fired power plants here in Bali, or the deforestation in the peatland rainforests of Kalimantan. These programs are similar in the way that they position issues of environmental and social justice at the forefront, allowing this purpose to guide the learning. One of my favorite teaching moments was in the lead up to our first ever international trip to the UN Climate Conference, or COP21 in Paris. While researching, writing, applying skills, and learning more about climate change in 3 weeks than most students do in a whole year, one of my high school students turned to me and said, "I forgot I was getting credit for this. I forgot it was for school." These programs also reflect my belief that it is imperative that social justice or peace-building education is integrated into learning for sustainability. All international schools share an inherent privileged and colonial existence. As peace educator, Monisha Bajaj states, "In implementing education for change, attention must be paid to the format, structure, and methods of education in order to prevent good intentions from causing harm or adverse consequences." As a school educating for sustainability, I believe it is our responsibility to push beyond narrow conceptions that focus on nature alone. Education sustainability without social justice risks perpetuating the very inequities that have resulted in ecological devastation in the first place. But the biggest project that I have embarked on during my time here has to be the school's curriculum. I can feel the eye rolls and the furrowed brows from all of you. You mean Green School has a curriculum? Close your eyes and picture a curriculum. What do you see? Perhaps it is a textbook, a series of lesson plans, a standardized exam, or a 637-page list of learning objectives in a particular subject at a particular level. Well, perhaps that is what defines curriculum in some systems, but it's not actually what the word or concept means. Distilled down to the essence, curriculum is simply the what and the how of learning. I say simply because when phrased that way, it certainly seems simple, doesn't it? What is taught? How is it taught? What is it that learners learn? And how best do they learn it? Yet at Green School, these two seemingly simple questions have confounded our community for years. Ask two of our educators or parents across the school what is taught here and how it is taught, and I believe you're likely to get different answers. And yes, we are a community of learners making our world sustainable, and we educate for sustainability, and our methods are real. I helped lead some of the processes to develop these core philosophical anchors, so I appreciate how important they can be in developing a shared understanding and providing a roadmap from which to build. Educators like me are also attracted by these philosophies because they believe in the power of transformative education. These statements also lend themselves well to external branding, marketing, and communications. But how do they come to life in our learners' experiences? What does real transformational teaching and learning look like, sound like, and feel like in a kindergarten class as compared to a social studies class in a high school? As educators, many of us agree that the outdated factory model, or what Paulo Freire calls the banking model of education, a model that relies on transactional, standardized, and fragmented approaches to teaching and learning, is not only inadequate, but counterproductive to achieving the regenerative ideas, values, and mindsets necessary for a sustainable future. Emergent or democratic learning disrupts this banking model as it transforms the teacher-student relationship by placing student curiosities and interests at the forefront. These methods are important for educators and school leaders to embed into a curriculum. Yet if educational experiences are completely student-driven, if educational experiences are completely student-driven, how do we ensure that core elements related to sustainability and social justice remain bedrock? How do we ensure that important programs are not lost to ever-evolving interests and passions? Because of these ongoing questions and tensions, I have been on a quest to achieve the right balance between structure and flexibility within a living curriculum, a quest to allow for learners, educators, and the curriculum itself to evolve within carefully designed foundational parameters, ensuring transformative education at the core. But let's go back to consider these beautiful buildings. After visiting Green School South Africa a few months ago, I keep thinking about the parallels between a sustainability school's architectural design and the design of its curriculum. Give the most skilled crafts and tradespeople some tools and sustainable materials, and I'm sure they would accomplish amazing things. But as I'm sure the architects of these beautiful buildings can also attest to, so much more goes into this process. Careful consideration of materials, harmony with the environment, expressions of culture, and intentions to inspire. In short, it is artistry. I believe it's the same for building a curriculum for transformational teaching and learning. Similar to the principles of sustainable architecture and design, the right amount of stability and structure within a curriculum is designed to bend, to flex, to grow, and to evolve. But it's not always easy to achieve. Too much structure risks standardization, perpetuating the fragmented banking model of education spoken of earlier. Too much flexibility creates chaos, risks burnout, as no matter how talented your team is, constant reinvention is just simply unsustainable. In short, too much flexibility crumbles. It is not built to last. So what is the right balance? Bridging the fields of architecture and child psychology, a study was conducted to discover the effects of a fence around a playground and its impact on children's behavior. Teachers were to take children to a local playground in which there was a fence. The same group was to be taken to a comparable playground in which the field of play was surrounded by a fence. In the playground with no fence, the children remained huddled around their teacher, fearful for wandering out of sight. The fence scenario exhibited dramatically different results, with the children feeling free to explore within the given boundaries. What this study demonstrates is that structures do not always stifle creativity. In fact, the right amount of structure does the opposite. It provides the parameters within which to get wild, push boundaries, and reimagine possibilities. Take away those parameters, and too often people, including student people and educator people, revert to familiar methods and tools that feel safe. So what are the right parameters to put in place from which to build a curriculum that fosters creativity, risk-taking, and truly transformational teaching and learning? One answer can be found within the field of holistic, integrated approaches to curriculum. Similar to the analogy of sustainable architecture and design, holistic, integrated curriculum embraces harmony and interconnectivity between learners, between educators and curriculum, between people and the planet, and between people and their whole selves. In this way, a holistic integrated curriculum speaks back to the banking model that disconnects our human lives from the life of the planet. It also provides important parameters that, if carefully constructed, ensure that education for sustainability and social justice remain foundational. But this requires slowing down, taking a breath, building together with intention. Sustainable peace educator Edward Brantmeyer says that slowing down is a revolutionary act. If we slow down, we can see the connections between and among seemingly fragmented needs, occurrences, and ways of being in the world. Susan Drake and Joanne Reed outline 3 distinct categories on a continuum of curriculum integration as a way for schools to practically conceptualize how to implement this type of learning. The first model is the multidisciplinary model. This model is most clearly reflected in our high school program. For instance, a student in our climate action block takes a math class that focuses on the mathematics of biodiesel. She also takes an integrated literacy and social studies class focusing on climate inaction and denial. This student sees climate represented through the lens of psychology, literacy, science, mathematics. After all, climate change is an everything issue, is it not? The second interdisciplinary model weaves discipline-specific outcomes together in such a way that the boundaries are blurred by a central topic or theme. The third model is called the transdisciplinary model, where disciplines, although present if looked for, are seamlessly blended and their particularities are not central to the planning. Our early years, primary and middle school bend and fluctuate between the interdisciplinary and the transdisciplinary models. Ask a student who has had the opportunity to learn about circular economies in the middle school, or Tana Inda in the primary school, and they can probably tell you how they collaborated on projects, thought critically about the values of equity, sustainability, and integrity, but they may not have recognized the ways in which social studies, science, enterprise, well-being, literacy were woven into their learning journeys. By repositioning real-world places, problems, and themes at the center, schools and educators honor students as whole beings with real lives, relationships, and the potential to become active change makers in their communities. But integrated learning is not necessarily new. Green School has a unique opportunity to push beyond other schools' approaches by intentionally placing issues of sustainability and social justice at the forefront. As Drake and Reed assert, the 21st century context makes an integrated approach even more appropriate, perhaps even urgently needed. It follows that the methods implemented within these structures must also support transformational teaching and learning. Methods that resist outdated approaches to learning that rely on knowledge content only. Learning that disconnects our heads from our hearts and our hands. Building off of the work of my colleagues, I led the design, development, and implementation of what we now call our balanced approach to learning at Green School. This pedagogical approach to curriculum integration recognizes that content knowledge, while important, cannot be fragmented or detached from values and skills. It welcomes student inquiry, problem-based and project-based strategies, yet ensures that important learning objectives are integrated along the way. As Puck Dave so eloquently asserts, knowing the geography of countries and capitals around the globe is interesting and important. But even more essential is asking critical questions about how borders and maps have come to be, under whose authority, privilege, perspective, and why. And what happens when an educator like Ibu Jackie recognizes that building time and space for relationship building with chickens is just as, if not more important than the construction of a well-designed chicken coop. As it turns out, this approach not only works for justice, peace, and the planet, but also results in happier, healthier students as well. But it is a big shift. How does a school's curriculum ensure that these happen intentionally and are not just happy accidents in some classes and not others? Implementing a holistic, integrated curriculum requires a leap, not only on the part of educators, but also school administrators, away from fragmented approaches to living and learning to a new way of understanding curriculum. One of my mentors in the field of holistic education, John Miller, posits that implementing a holistic curriculum requires not only the learning program, but also the school itself to operate as a complex living organism that is evolving. Similar to the ways in which learning has become fragmented in the banking or industrial education tradition, so too has the organization of schools, their operations, and governance structures. Corporate globalized ideologies, mostly Western ideologies, have informed this approach to standardization and replication across the globe. As schools grew in size, the need for efficiency resulted in more fragmentation and standardization. With this shift came a culture of deprofessionalizing teachers, as Sir Ken Robinson puts it, an assumption that teaching was merely transactional, of education as a machine to be fine-tuned and replicated. But as I'm sure all of the educators in this space can attest to, education is not transactional. It is relational. And if carefully constructed and supported, it can be transformational. From my perspective, working on the school's curriculum, I have seen the ways in which these assumptions about education have trickled into our organization in the name of efficiency. Green School has experienced the same challenges as many schools have around the world, compounded by a rapid rate of growth that resulted in a new management structure nearly every single year. Over these years, I have found myself constantly asking questions such as, how do we balance our need for stability with our desire to be creative, flexible, and evolving? How do we stay true to, value, and support our approach to education as we welcome new perspectives? What effect does our fragmented approach to organization and leadership have on our faculty's ability to implement a holistic, integrated curriculum? School leadership guru Peter Senge offers a systems perspective that is important for all schools to consider. He uses a Sufi parable to outline the follies of a fragmented approach to organizational management, and growth. It is the story of a group of blind men who have never come across an elephant before and who learn and conceptualize what the elephant is like by touching it. Each blind man feels a different part of the elephant's body, but only one part, such as the ear or the tusk. They then describe the elephant based on their limited experience, and their descriptions of the elephant are different from one another. Senge then connects this parable to the fragmented divide, delegate, and conquer habits of many schools and learning organizations by saying, incidentally, sometimes people go ahead and divide an elephant in half anyways. You don't have two small elephants then. You have a mess. And by a mess, I mean a complicated problem where there is no leverage to be found because the leverage lies in the interactions that cannot be seen from looking only at the piece you are holding. I believe it is incumbent on us then to question, because of the rate of change and growth at Green School, how might we have adopted a fragmented divide and conquer mentality, informed by principles of corporate growth that are not necessarily aligned with holistic, sustainable development? How might we risk devaluing and undermining the efforts to implement transformational teaching and learning through these habits? And if indeed we recognize this risk, how can we then work to ensure that our approach to transformational learning is steadfast, valued, nurtured, nourished, aligned across all areas of the school and the community, and that our educators are reprofessionalized, empowered, and trusted as the artists that they are to bring it to life? We're not alone with these issues. Many educational institutions are working with these very same challenges. But I began this talk with a story of how education to me equates to hope. What I will take away with me from my time at Green School is not only a reaffirmation of this belief, but so many stories and examples of it to be truth. I will also be taking away a new appreciation for the way in which a school's curriculum can nurture these types of experiences, even if much of my work in curriculum here at Green School feels unfinished. For my students, I hope to have instilled the idea that each voice matters, that with the privileges that each of us enjoys, we have the responsibility to use those voices and work to restore more equitable relationships with each other and with the more than human world. As educators and community members, our work is no different. To live and work in this community, on this land, and in this culture is a privilege for all of us. We have to be careful to use that privilege wisely, build with intention, value the work and the people, and ensure that equity and sustainability remain bedrock. We are all here because we believe that school has to be more than just teaching knowledge and subjects. And at Green School, we have the unique freedom to be whatever we have the courage to see. But it takes work to unlearn harmful narratives about education, about peace and the planet, and to become mindful storytellers of a new tomorrow. In a time of so much uncertainty, in a world of mutating viruses, a warming climate, in a time that the isolation and fragmentation of our societies is being exposed as inequitable, unsustainable, we've also come to understand that through all of this, teachers and schools have had the power to make the impossible possible, and that is something to be hopeful about. Thank you. Thank you.